Hey everyone, and welcome to the news. So, this is a massive episode. We have a new PTR build that has some really exciting stuff, perhaps even teasing a future release date, and then we have the Q&A that actually did announce some pretty neat stuff, but with, something that baffled me so much that you'll just need to stick around. It's a thing. So, yeah, I have words for them. Anyway, for the most part, though, it's actually a very good week. And I should probably also announce what we're doing with the Master tier. So we are kicking off just under a year of class-themed designs, with Monk being this month. So there's now 3 things. There's the art card, the bestiary, and a 10cm vinyl class sticker. And the better that stuff does, the more we can put in it. And yeah, we're really excited to see where it goes. And we're kicking off with the more traditional fantasy classes. So you won't be seeing a Death Knight or a Demon Hunter because, well, those things are Blizzards. But after that, we'll be experimenting with, some more different stuff. Anyway, that is currently available until the end of the month over on Patreon. And with that, let's get into the news. So, level 120 Heirlooms, this is a move that will make a lot of people happy. They're coming in 8.1.5, well, the Heirloom upgrades are, and that means you'll be able to shave 40 to 50% off your leveling times from 110 to 120 after the patch drops. And it's pretty crazy, especially since BFA leveling is already extremely fast. Now, the XP cap, the bonus XP cap that this shares with Recruit a Friend doesn't actually work with, that doesn't actually interact with other things, so you'll be able to use full Heirlooms plus the XP potion from 8.1 plus the Assault XP bonus, though of course the XP bonus from Assaults only lasts for an hour, and the Assaults themselves are a little bit weaker for leveling than they were in Legion, but not really anymore. With all of this stuff, an Assault might be like 70% of a level, maybe 60%, plus the XP boost from afterwards. Now, given how the Assaults are so much better laid out than the Invasions, this actually does make them quite time efficient. Now, getting to the other continent, yeah, that can be kind of troublesome while you're leveling, but hey, if there's an Assault up, you can do that and it will be pretty good for your XP. Next up, let's talk about release dates. So this technically does involve a minor plot spoiler, but this is actually something that many people have taken to be a patch release date reveal. I don't really think it's necessarily that at all, but I do think it's hinting at stuff. So on the 815 PTR, there's a questline where Brann and Magni Brann team up and they venture through Uldir. After dealing with yet more Void stuff, they decide to transport Mother to the Chamber of the Heart. Why do they decide to do that? Well, they want to work out just a little bit better what's actually going on with Azeroth, and Mother says that it will take 77 cycles to complete her analysis. Now, 77, that's a number that will be very familiar to people who played Legion. During that expansion, each patch rolled out 77 days after the last, pretty much without fail throughout the entire body of that expansion. So seeing 77 here has led to many people thinking that patch 8.2 will come out 77 days after patch 8.1.5. So let's run some numbers and see how likely it is. LFR dazar'alor fully unlocks at the end of February. Now, if 815 was to come out on the first Tuesday of March, then that would be the 5th of March. Now, if we go forward 77 days, that takes us to Tuesday the 21st of May, and that seems fairly reasonable. And being honest, yeah, the game really will need some new content by then. Well, yeah, 7.3 came out 148 days after 7.2. Now, this would involve 8.2 coming out 161 days after 8.1. Now, it's fair to say that 8.1 did not have as much content as 7.2 did, and overall, this is a more sparse period in the game in terms of its content, and that perhaps is reflecting a desire from Blizzard to spread things out a little bit more. Again, we'll know if that has worked out, if, the next expansion comes out maybe 9 months after the final patch of BFA and not 14 or 15. Now, it also could be that 8.1.5 will come out the same day that LFR releases, and that 8.2 will be out, a bit earlier in May, but overall, May seems very likely for Nazjatar. As for the 77-day thing, well, it just so happens that the 77 days fits their patch cycle, which is something that they just managed to achieve during Legion. Locking into a release date is extremely risky, so I would imagine that on the 77th cycle, what will actually happen is we'll get an encrypted quest, one that maybe teases Nazjatar, and maybe that's something that'll come out a week or two before the new patch launches. Next, Blizzard has actually hired a new creative director. We do not know what project they're working on, but we do know that this new hire, Sebastian, was a lead director on story elements of Cyberpunk 2077 and also had experience with Witcher 2 and Witcher 3. And I go into a lot more detail on this on my news channel and what it could mean. But yeah, for the most part, they're hiring somebody externally. They probably want new blood. And yeah, kind of makes sense because it's 2 different companies with 2 different storytelling or styles of storytelling. So they probably just want something new. Again, we don't really know a a great deal. That's the basic story. If you'd like to learn more, as well as a number of other stories, I think we've had 4 or 5 videos out this week, and that's all on the second channel, so you can check that out. Next, let's talk about the Scarlet Brotherhood. So, well, the Scarlet Crusade was mostly, wiped out, but they seem to be reforming, or at least a sort of a new version of a, all-living anti-undead movement based in the northern region of the Eastern Kingdoms. We are not exactly sure on the specifics, but Wowhead have data mined some new lines, and they all talk about the formation of the Brotherhood. With the chant Lordaeron for the living. So it's pretty cool. Wowhead actually pointed out a number of anti-alliance pamphlets as well that had previously been data mined, and this fanatical new anti-undead group certainly would not be a fan of Kalia. So this could spark off some political instability within the alliance, especially if some of their more important members decide to go along with this Scarlet Brotherhood group. And then I also wonder how this group could interact with Uther. Remember, they revamped Uther's tomb, but so far no story has actually followed. So perhaps we could see Kalia and co, skirmish with them for Uther's tomb, something like that. Maybe the light will grant Uther a second life, like Kalia. Though I suppose, unlike Kalia, his body's probably not in a great state right now. Next up, Q&A announcements. So the Q&A actually covered quite a bit. So first, there are minor class changes coming in 8.15 that will feel kind of major. When talking about the GCD, they actually said that they broadly think that things, just being on the GCD is a good idea for spells, including offensive cooldowns, but that one big problem is that many offensive cooldowns, well, hitting the button just feels a bit lame. Like you hit Ascendance, your model swaps, and you don't do anything. And if you're a healer, that actually might feel like you're wasting a global that could be healing, and it might feel bad. So instead, what they want to do is add active components, such that as an example, if a Resto Shaman used Ascendance, using Ascendance would create a big burst heal. Personally, I think that's a far, far better design than what they currently have. If casting Ascendance could feel more like casting Void Form and getting a big burst of damage, then yeah, I'm absolutely down for a change like that. Next, Ian said that he will look into allowing the 50 character limit to all be in the same server. No date for this, but he really seemed to just think that he could get that done, so that was pretty cool. And then he also said that he liked the idea of being able to send war resources to alts through a BOA item, and that he could probably get that put into patch 8.1.5. Again, quite fantastic. He then went on to explain Heart of Azeroth changes. Basically, all future Azeroth gear will have all rings unlocked, and future HOA levels will unlock traits on the HOA itself, with these things being, themed after different types of content. It was actually, according to him, inspired by how you would do different types of content in Legion for different tints, just that for this, it's mechanical with the traits. So the idea of having Mythic Plus inspired traits, Raid inspired ones, things like that, and this includes active abilities that will impact your build. Overall, I can't call, anything on it until we actually see what the details are, but on the whole, it does seem like this would be a massive upgrade over what we currently have. He then went on to say that having some titles and cosmetic rewards for Mythic Plus does actually make a lot of sense given how it's now a pillar of the game, but really that is something that would be a bit further off. So with those main announcement things covered, soft announcements, let's get on to the topical stuff. And first up, the PvP gear vendor topic. We just need to be real about this. Now, most of you probably don't PvP, but I would implore you to listen on because this is so indicative of their broad philosophy. So, one of the main reasons against having a PvP vendor is that of clarity, with Ian saying that it was just too obtuse to earn a currency to find a vendor and work out what to purchase from the vendor. He said that their new system is more clear and understandable. Now, to recap, the modern system is that you get random drops, and that if you fill your conquest bar, you get a bit of loot. That bit of loot and its item level are based on a set schedule plus a random weekly box. And his answer was just flabbergastingly bad. His answer was good. He explained what he thought, but what he thought is the problem. So the team's goal is supposedly to reduce obscurity and to make things clear. Yet, if you want to know what gear is available, you have to leave World of Warcraft. You then need to find the right blue post, which, bear in mind, was posted days ago, but will become obscure over time. You then need to work out what week of PvP you're in by counting forward from the season's start date. Ian, my man, that is not simple. Now, you said that currencies and vendors are complicated. You still have gold in the game. You added in doubloons, service medals. People can work out what a vendor is. Why? We all use currency and vendors in our daily life. It's called going to the shop for lunch. That means that in WoW, if I get a currency that I don't recognize, I know what a currency is, so I just Google where to spend it, and that's that. Once I'm at the vendor, I can look at what the vendor is selling, and I can work out for myself what I want. I don't need you to take care of me by providing me a pre-planned itinerary. And I mean very simply, like, your schedule might not work with mine. Maybe there's a weapon this week, but what if I already have a weapon? What if I want to spend the conquest that I earned on something else? Maybe a new trinket, or to replace some low item level gloves. Your system allows for no freedom. It is either an entirely pre-planned thing, or it is complete randomness. Now, bearing in mind here that Ian said their broad goal was simplicity and a lack of obscurity, and that vendors and currencies are too confusing, just get a load of this. Each week, and he went on to explain this, each week you get a challenger's coin. Now, if you bonus roll, you get a second one. Remember that the bonus roll costs a currency, the Warforged Fate seals, and that getting that currency requires 2 other currencies, gold and resources. Now, if you get 10 of those challenger's coins, then you can turn them in to an upgrade token that will upgrade your PvP gear to an item level depending on your arena rating bracket, which, once again, you need to go and look up a table somewhere to see how all that works. This system is so much more contrived than a simple currency. We all know how currencies work. They're something from the real world. This is a contrived rule set that has been made by developers who are so focused on squashing imaginary problems that they have seemingly forgotten to design the game. Now, he is right in saying that PvP gear does have a different place now, that it is just as good as PvE gear. Honestly, having a currency plus a lighter version of the WOD system is probably the way to go. I'm fine with my PvP gear not being ideal in PvE. But this current one, it's beyond silly, and it makes me question the mindset of those making this game. In the past, you got Conquest, you went to a vendor, you spent it. That was that, nice and simple. Now, you get Conquest, you get your Challenger's coin, you get a pre-planned bit of gear, you get a random from the chest, you check the schedule online, then you maybe get another coin, another Challenger's coin from your bonus roll, then you wait until you've got 10 coins, then you check the schedule again, then you check the upgrade token bracket item levels. Come on, man, it's not like myself and Wowhead are slipping you 50s under the table to make the game more obtuse. I mean, we do well from it, we make the guides, but come on, it's just silly. Basically, all in all, I believe personally that Ian's thinking in explaining this is so misguided that it is just a catastrophe of design. Next though, let's talk about War Mode, which for me has actually been a bright spot recently. So, they acknowledge that War Mode giving 400s is an issue, and that they likely will decrease it to 385, plus getting some Conquest points next week, which I think is pretty good. Now, it was originally equal to Heroic Uldir when it launched, but that was months into the raid, so having a 100% Heroic drop right off the bat for dazar'alor seems a bit strong, so it's being tweaked down. As for the rest of War Mode, well, they wanted to balance factions, and the data suggests that they are getting there. The goal is for less Horde players to have it purely for, like the incentives, and for Alliance players to get into it more for the sake of doing PvP. Now, the problem is that balancing all of this through incentives does make it quite tricky. At the end of the day, people are going to game the system where they can. So, past the 400 being toned down, they think they're actually getting a lot closer, and they expect to see the current 30% reward buff decrease over time as more Alliance players enter War Mode and do that quest to kill 25 Hordes, which in turn, because the Hordes are being killed, it will encourage the Hordes who have turned on War Mode but don't like PvP to turn it off. So for my part, I have loved War Mode recently. I've been having a lot of fun. I've been getting into some really good balanced battles during assaults. I think that's a great experience, actually, War Mode plus assaults, but I do understand that for many, there's a lot of degenerate gameplay, such as flight point ganking, that isn't really ideal. Next up, let's talk about gear. So this starts off with Titanforging and the idea of being able to use Valor points to manually Titanforge gear. Well, this got a no from Ian, at least for current patches, and the problem is one of balancing tiers. If normal mode raiders could always upgrade their gear to be Titanforged, what happens when the next tier comes along? Well, the new items for the appropriate difficulty of that team skill would not feel like much of an upgrade until after a few weeks of Titanforging, with being similar to, say, what happened with Valor points during patches back in Mists of Pandaria. Now, this could be solved by either having a larger gap between raids in terms of item level, which would contribute to bloat, or by, by it being normal for new gear to just sit in your bags until it gets upgraded. And that's actually all fair enough. He's totally right on those things being really big problems. Personally, I think that it would work if the upgrades and Titanforging itself were limited to 10 item levels above the base item level of a bit of gear. That would mean that for a normal raider, they would always be getting upgrades as they continued to play. It would mean that moving into heroic within the same tier would always get them good upgrades because, you know, it's 5 more than a normal +2 upgrades. And it would also mean that normal mode for the next tier, assuming it was 15 item levels higher, would always be better than normal from the previous tier. And this would act as a stable nerf to content in a similar-ish way to past catch-up currencies. I mean, it would preserve a lot of the points of the, the things that he liked about Titanforging. It would allow for people to always have something to work towards that is meaningful to them on their gear, something that's more meaningful to them than AP. Now, since Blizzard's goal is always to get people to play the game more, I really do think that that makes rough sense. I don't think that any Titanforging beyond 10 item levels is really good for the game anyway. I think it muddles up the relationship between content and reward, and I think it fails basic human psychology as well. You will lose more Titanforge rolls than you'll win, and humans focus on negative experiences more than positive ones. Now, variable reward systems hook most people early on, but they don't actually last for the average member of the population, and that is why games that use variable reward systems and a lot of RNG, especially the free-to-play ones, they rely on vulnerable people who the industry otherwise refers to as whales. Next, catch-up was also mentioned, and Ian talked about how there should be a way for people who played the game, months ago but want to jump back in, that they should be able to do that. Now, in principle, I do actually kind of agree with him, but I think that a little bit more work should be required on their part. After all, racing through the progression overly fast actually removes gameplay from that player when they come back and they want to see what they've missed. I'm fine with catch-up. And I think we had that back at Wrath of the Lich King through our currencies or in future expansions from other systems. So while I do broadly agree with Ian in some regards there, we really do depart with a modern system, and the catch-up stuff is fully present in all elements of the game, and that does lead to a gearing system that I think robs people of meaning from actively playing the game. Now, yes, it is important to make the game accessible for people to return after a few months, but I don't think that needs to come at so much of an expense to the integrity of the current progression, and the person who said this best recently is Preach, and that is that right now, catch-up is gearing. Personally, I was able to get the same item level as my raiding friend with 1/3 of the playtime, and I didn't really touch any of the raid content, and he was doing it all, and that is just a bit wild. Next, class-specific sets. So, same answer as always, they want to have more variety, they want to have the raid style of set, the Warfront style of set, and that overall the goal to remove the class-based stuff was just to experiment a little bit more. And I think some of that's worked out. It's kind of cool having a separate raid theme and PvP theme along with the Warfront sets, but I think they could probably ship out a good bit more in terms of the quantity of sets, and I think there's just a lot more that they could do with the transmog system, and if not doing class sets was to allow them to do a lot more with the visual progression of the game, I might be behind that, but right now I do think I'd need to see just a little bit more output for from the team in that regard before I'm sort of properly satisfied with it. Next up, we have allied races. So many people pointed out that Dark Iron and Zandalari were actually supposed to be there from launch. That's what they initially advertised. Now, of course, that did not happen, and Ian said that's because their plans changed with Kultiran humans. Unlike the other allied races, the Kultirans are entirely new, and therefore equaled a lot more development time than really most of the other allied races combined, and that's because of them needing a full set of, new rigs, new models, and new animations. Now, many people will likely not believe him here because you just see the end product, and, bros make it look easy. But Ian's totally right. Multiple of my real-life friends work in 3D animation, and even in our company, we've done lots of skeleton animation in 2D with Spine. Creating new skins and tweaks to existing rigs, that's extremely easy and cheap. But making a brand new rig and stuff for that is actually a tremendous amount of work. So when he talked about the technical stuff, yeah, Ian is right in this one. So this meant that Zandalari were delayed to release in line with the Kultirans, and Magni were shuffled forward to be released earlier than intended. Now this, to me, actually indicates that their anti-light recruitment storyline was intended to be shown later on in the expansion's lifecycle. Now given what it covers, we could see the light be a good bit more villainous and conflicted in the future, which is kind of cool. Next up, Ian talked about long-term design, and this is a pretty important one actually. So on the whole, he said it's really about like dichotomies, such as, balancing short-term stuff that feels good versus long-term health. And he's totally right here. It seems like a massive challenge. And really what I'd say back is that I think that the team have been very focused on problem-solving their existing system, squashing, issues with player behavior. And I think they've been creating new systems from a problem-solving first mindset. And I think that's meant they've lost design leadership or maybe design vision. I would recommend that they just by default go with far more simple systems, closer to those of the past, and instead focus their design efforts on creating new types of content, things that feel different to play, decent classes, simple yet understandable gear, and then ideally a lot of new, ideally systemic and replayable content to keep the overall health of the MMO happy. For me, islands are kind of like that. They exist so that their randomness technically solves the AP farming problem of Legion, yet in reality they ended up doing the exact opposite of what they wanted to do, and this is really because of the problem-solving focused design. These things weren't really designed with the goal of exploring an island or going on an expedition to an island. Instead, it's a big, balanced rush to the finish. And I don't think that's the type of experience that players really wanted. And it's another example of they were designed to plug a hole in the ship to solve an issue, but I don't think they were designed with their core experience first. And I really think that is what's important. So yeah, I mean, it's weird with this video. It was going really well, and there was a lot of good stuff, and then it took a hard turn in the Ian, I don't agree with you direction. And yeah, look, that's just how their reward design is in my view. I think this stuff's going to keep on happening. I just don't agree with the direction they're going in. And to be frank, I think that while these explanations from Ian are well put, and I think they do have a lot of points, I don't think many of them really hold that much water when you really dive into them, and the PvP answer I think is particularly indefensible. I just don't think they're designing this game from first principles and first thinking about what's fun and thinking from the player first. I think they're identifying problems and issues and they are trying to solve them via rather blunt and direct means, often not really thinking of the consequences or the quality of the final design that their current approach results in. So I would implore them to make the game more simple and just cut down the number of intricate reward mechanics and all those things, and just, have something a bit more simple rather than the current system. Which, I mean, with the current system, if you have an informational advantage on how the game works, your life is so much easier and so much more effective. It's so gameable. And really, just all these times they try to simplify the game and make things more beautiful and perfect, they do the opposite. And ultimately, I'd say this, Blizzard, we're not babies. Most of the people who play this game are actually pretty old as far as gaming goes. We've been playing WoW for a long time, we know how games work. You don't need to spoon feed us as much as you guys are trying to, and I think that in trying to make a system that automatically spoon feeds, us all the time, we can just go to the fridge and grab what we want. You don't need to create a massive, a massive contraption to automate all of this stuff and create the perfect gear distribution flow system, whatever. You can just do something really simple and people will be able to work it out. And I think that if you guys did that, you'd be really a lot more freed up to work on more innovative content. Because I think as we've went through BFA, a lot of people have been like, yeah, the raids are great, Mythic Plus is still Mythic Plus, but like the other stuff's not mega exciting, and I feel like a lot of that's just because the team have not been great at designing content from a player experience first perspective. They're just trying to be like, I think we could beef up our weekly roster of activities. Warfronts, islands, not ideal. So yeah, I mean, there you go. That's my thoughts on the Q&A. Let me know what you think, I suppose, especially if you're a PvPer. I mean, that PvP thing triggered my trap card. That's kind of how it went. But yeah, I mean, hey, the rest of the stuff's pretty good, and do check out the more recent lore on this channel. There is actually some extremely, extremely exciting stuff with N'Zoth. And hey, there's also videos on the news channel that you can check out. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.